There are a lot of reasons why people do not become better at the game at Master Duel, that is. Also TCG and OCG, I guess it's the same. Today I want to talk about 4 things that you can do to improve at Master Duel, at the game of Yu-Gi-Oh in general, and climb down from, I think it's Iron or it's Bronze, I'm not quite sure, and it's long ago that I've been there, up to Master 1, also maybe top tournaments, whatever it is. If you want to become better at the game, to be better on the ladder, or maybe to participate in tournaments and be successful, I will tell you today what it takes to achieve this. So the first thing that I want to talk about is something that has to do a little bit more with laziness. So I would say if you are playing the game of Master Duel or the game of Yu-Gi-Oh in general, then use the time and really play the game, and don't go like, oh, I'm going to play Tetris on my second monitor while my opponent combos through his entire combo line. So let's, for example, say you're playing against Super Heavy Samurai or another combo deck at the moment that might be either Super Heavy or maybe a Noble Knight, and they're doing their combo. You don't have any hand traps, so you can basically relax, watch them combo along, and then try to break their board, right? But what you can also do to improve, and this is very, very crucial, is to read their cards. This is not something that a lot of people do. A lot of people aren't even aware of what their own cards do. So if you build a deck, yeah, you should first go, or if you net copy a deck, so if you take it from like the internet and just use it, so go Master Duel Meta, for example, you copy the first place list, or you maybe have copied my first place Snake Eyes list, and then I've made a video about, and you just go and use this. You can do that, but you will be even better, you will improve at the game if you at least know your own cards, but even better, know the cards your opponent is playing. So in the time that your opponent is comboing, just read the cards of your opponents. And some people might already think, okay, I know the cards, I know what they are doing, basically I know T-Elements Rhinoheart just dumps a monster to the graveyard so you can fusion summon, and that's correct, that is what Rhinoheart does. But Rhinoheart, for example, also has another effect. Do you know the second effect of the card, or do you know that often cards also have a third effect, or also called hidden effects, which are not really hidden, they are just like lazy people not reading the complete card. That's why they are hidden. They are not really hidden because it's written on the card, you just have to read it. So take a time that you are have to take in watching your opponent do his combo, and read his card, understand his cards. And if you do know the cards in general, that's super good. Then you can go along next level and try to understand the problem-solving card text of these cards. This refers to the phrases then and if, also and if you do. So the problem-solving card text, the conjunctions basically tell you in what sequence an effect will happen. So some cards, for example, have 2 parts of an effect, and depending on the problem-solving card text, depending on the conjunction on the card, that means that these 2 parts of the effect either happens simultaneously or they happen sequentially, which can make a big difference when it comes to stuff like cards missing their timings. But this is more on a deeper level. This is understanding Yu-Gi-Oh at a deeper level, and this directly goes over into my second tip, my second point. Do understand the game rules. The first thing that I have done when coming back to this game, and I will link this channel if I can find it in the description below so that you can also take a look. There was a channel that had, or still has, I guess, 25 videos on Yu-Gi-Oh rulings on how to play the game, from what is a normal summon until how can a card miss its timing, Sagok, and these problem-solving card text words that I've just talked about. So what I did, I went there and I read, or basically I watched and read. So I sometimes had the Yu-Gi-Oh ruling book on the second monitor. So when I wasn't quite clear about something, I went over there and watched or read the exact ruling. But I watched these videos just to understand how the game is played, even though at that point I was only playing Master Duel, and Master Duel basically plays the game for you, right? So you can build a chain in Master Duel, and Master Duel resolves the chain for you without you having to do anything. Obviously, if you are playing the TCG and the OCG, that's not something you can do. You have to resolve the chain yourself, which means you have to understand how a chain resolves. This is not something you have to understand in Master Duel, so a lot of people, I would say 80% of the player base, doesn't really know how it works or how different things works when resolving stuff, for example, or when it comes to stuff like missing the timing. So, for example, when Kashira Fenrir was a card that was played a lot of people were wondering, okay, why can't I chain my Fenrir? A monster effect was activated, which is obviously because Fenrir is not a quick effect, and not quick effect, a trigger effect, like Fenrir's, can not be activated in the same chain if it's not a fast effect. It will activate in the chain afterwards, which make obviously a big difference when it comes to how you want to play the game, because it could be the case that your opponent activates a card effect and then also activates something that destroys your Fenrir. Let's say you have a Fenrir on the field, and then obviously your Fenrir will never get its effect through it. If you do not know this, if you do not know how this chain resolves, then you might not be able to, in this specific sequence, maybe save your Fenrir so you can afterwards activate his effect. Because this is not something the game tells you, this is something that you have to understand. And I think this is one of the biggest factors if you want to go from, hey, I can play the game, or I can quite successfully play the game, Master Duel tells me a lot, I might be Platinum or maybe even Diamond. Don't get me wrong, you can get Master 1 without understanding these really in-depth learnings and rules about the game. It's totally possible, but you will have a harder time and it will be less consistent. And at the point where you want to play, for example, in tournaments and want to top or win the tournaments, I think then that's the point at which you really need to understand the rulings. Or, for example, if you want to go over to the TCG and play the game, the real card game, invest in the cards and want to play it in your local store, for example, or maybe even go to a YCS or a regional, then you really have to understand these basic rulings, these complicated things about the game. But just take the time and invest the time into learning how that works. This will make you a way better player. This is what differentiates like the bottom 90% from the top 10%, understanding all these very crucial and impactful rules, I would say. So this is the second tip that I want to give you. And this does directly lead me into the third point, which I think the third point that I'm mentioning now, together with the second point I've just mentioned, so understanding the basic rules. These are the two most important aspects. So understanding basic rules plus the X that I'm going to talk about next are the most important things to understand when it comes to getting better at the game. So I think the other thing combining with basic rules is the understanding of the meta. So you need to understand what the meta is, so what decks are played and how these decks are working. I think you can be a good understander of the basic rules, but if you do not understand what decks are being played at the moment and what they want to do, then you can only get so far. And there you can use a lot of resources. You can obviously use YouTube, you can use Master Duel Meta, or for example Untapped GG. Both of them will be linked in the description below. So in Master Duel Meta, you can also take a look at the tier list, which is combined from like events and tournaments tops, which is not always the most accurate one. I think the one on Untapped GG is a bit better, even though Untapped GG also has its problems at the moment in not showing you a win rate for a deck, but only showing you like this is S and this is A tier, for example, which is not that helpful. But what you can do on Untapped GG, for example, is you can take a look at what deck is mostly played, so popularity. So at this current moment, because it's the most popular at this time, I'm using this as an example. Snake Eyes is at, last time I looked, around 18% popularity, so very, very popular. And you can also take a look at which decks are played in your league. So for example, you might be in gold, and you can then see on Untapped GG, okay, a lot of people are playing Dark Magician in gold, for example, right? So what you can then do is go over on Master Duel Meta or on YouTube and go take a look at some deck lists for Dark Magician, and even more optimally, you go take a look at a Dark Magician guide, a combo guide. So you should understand the basic combo, or what the deck basically wants to do, of every very important deck in the meta, right? So and this depends on your league, right? So as I already said, if you are in gold, you need to understand what, for example, Dark Magician does. But if you are playing at the moment in Diamond or Master, you will need to understand what Snake Eyes does, for example. And you don't need to understand every combo and every specific combo line and every niche trick. This is then next level if you want to like win really big tournaments against really good players. Or if you want, talking about real life now, go to a YCS and win a YCS, then you really have to understand each little thing, each little trick. But for you to be successful or more successful at the game, it is firstly enough that you understand what each meta deck does. So you understand the basic combo, you understand what cards in general want to do, so you have an idea of what you can do to stop your opponent. And this goes above simply knowing when you should imperm or you should ash. But this is also maybe in understanding which of your extra deck monsters, maybe you have some options that you can make. Like let's for example say you have an IP Masquerena and you could go into an Appaloosa, or you could go into an unicorn. If you know the deck of your opponents, then you might be better able to understand which one would be the correct extra deck monster, because obviously this can differ from situation to situation and goes above hand traps, right? So understand the meta, understand which decks are in the meta and what they want to do, how they are wanting to play, so to better be able to defeat them. And the last thing that you can do to improve at the game, and this is definitely one of the less important ones, I would say, but definitely still very helpful, go take a look at your own replays and have the right mindset. I guess mindset is very important now that I think about it, but go take a look at your replays first, which means do not take a look at every replay. You don't need to take a look at a replay, for example, where you had only one combo starter and your opponent, I don't know, you maybe play a Snake Eye Ash, your opponent plays an Infinite Impermanence and your turn is over and then he just kills you because you don't have a hand trap. Then there's not really something to learn there. But there are a lot of games in which you have the feeling, okay, I could have maybe done something better. And if you have this feeling, then go take a look at the replay and try to learn from your mistakes. Take a look at what you could have done better, and maybe there was even a better line that you could have taken. Maybe go through in your head through the line and try to think of where this line could have led you. This is obviously more easy when you are in the paper game because you have the cards in your hand, and then you might be able to recreate the situation, though then you don't have a replay because it's a paper game. But take a look at your replays in which you have the feeling that could have gone better, maybe where there was a complex game state with very different options that you could have decided on. Also your tournament plays. This is why, for example, I do these tournament recap videos that you have seen in which I go over the replays and obviously also think about what I could have done better, giving me a better opportunity to learn and then be better at the next game, obviously. So don't take a look at every game. And now the second part of this tip number 4, I guess, is the mindset, because I know a lot of people and it always confuses me. This is not only Master Duel, right? This is the life in general. If you are always focusing on, okay, this didn't work because of the external situation or because of external factor X, then you are not really going to learn much, right? So if you are thinking, oh, I can't win in Master Duel because my opponent always has a hand trap or because I always brick with my hand. So firstly, if you always brick, then this might be a sign of you having like a bad deck. In terms of bad deck building, you might have too much hand traps in it, but this could also be a sign of you overestimating the amount of times you brick. So if you really think you are bricking all the time, go write it down, right? Check for how often do I brick, how often have I combo, and just write it down, because we as humans tend to overestimate the negative outcomes, and they are not as common as we might think. If we are in a bad mood, for example, if we are in a bad mood, we are thinking, oh, I'm always drawing the brick, our opponent always has the hand trap. Of course they don't. And if you always search the responsibility in an external factor, then obviously you can't learn, right? Because if the game always gives you a brick hand, or if your opponent always has the hand trap, then what can you even do, right? You can do nothing. This is good in terms of saving your ego, in the sense that you can say, oh, I'm a really good player, but I just always brick, but I'm a super top player, right? But this is extremely bad in the sense that you then don't learn anything, because what can you change, right? But if you have the mindset of, okay, I might not have had the optimal hand, what is the thing that I could have done better? So a simple example here, let's imagine you have triple Ash and 2 Nibiru's in your starting and going first. Then this is obviously a brick hand, but you can still decide on whether you want to set down an Ash, so play an Ash face down for 1/8 defense, or if you do not want to do this. I think in this instance, you would definitely play the Ash because you have 3 of this, and your opponent might just kill you, and this Ash might be able to save you, even though it's not that likely, right? So even though you had a really bricky hand, there's still a decision to be made. And if, for example, you would not have placed the Ash face down, then you could tell yourself, okay, this was a mistake, I should have played the Ash, even though the possibility of that saving you is not that high, right? But this can make a difference. So always look for, what could I have done better? Obviously, Yu-Gi-Oh is a game of luck. And one thing that you have to be okay with is these lucky factors. There will be times in which you brick, times in which your opponent has all the hand traps, and then like his single combo starter, FMX Circular, Snake Eye Ash or whatever, and you can't do anything, right? And you have to accept this. And obviously don't get mad at this point, because if you are getting mad, then you are more likely to attribute to external factors and say, oh, it's because of the game, it always gives me bad hands. I have a friend of mine, he's like, oh, sometimes if he like loses a lot, he's like, oh, I think there's something wrong with the shuffling mechanism of this game. It always gives me a bad hand. There's something wrong here. And I'm like, okay. even if that's true, right? If the shuffling mechanism is a bit off, then it's also true for your opponent. So samesies, I guess it's plus minus zero if you want to call it that. So always have people in psychology call this a growth mindset versus I don't know what the other thing is called. I think a fixed mindset. The one being, okay, where can I grow and what are things that I can do better? And the other one is always putting everything on external factors to protect your own ego and being able to say, I'm the best. Yeah, I'm look at me. I'm such a cool guy. I'm a Master Duel master player. But you learn nothing, so you can't really get better. Try to overcome your ego and be better at the game by looking at your own mistakes and asking yourself what you could have done better. And I think that's it. If you are implementing these 4 tips, you will for 100% sure be better at the game afterwards. This might not always be easy. This is definitely tough. It's a tough process. It's a learning process. Every learning process is tough in itself, but you can do it if you are just following these tips. Let me know in the comments what you think of this. Do you disagree? Do you agree? What of these things are you already doing? What you might not doing, or why aren't you doing it? Or maybe you have also some tips for the community, what you are doing to improve that I have not mentioned. Let me know in the comments, and if you like my content, please consider subscribing, hitting the thumbs up and the notification bell. This helps out a lot, and we will see each other in the next one.